After the Jake Retzloff news, there was a lot of questions that arose around BYU and what they'd be able to accomplish this season. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know what they can do across the entire season, but I know one thing for certain. With this new news, they are going to fall to Iowa State in Ames, and we're talking about why today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today we are talking, oddly enough, not about Farmageddon, no, not about the Cyhawk game, no, about the game against BYU late in the season. We'll break down why I think Iowa State's going to walk away with the win there after some kind of recent developments have occurred over in Provo. That's super exciting. Then we're going to shift gears and talk a little bit about the tight ends. Will they fit into this offense? What is that going to look like for Iowa State? And then finally, we're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball in the third segment and talk about the offensive line. What feels like an everlasting question mark, but could be a strong suit for Iowa State this season. I can't wait to dive into all that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel and the football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, let's talk about BYU and why Iowa State's walking away with this victory. It seems more and more likely they are going to be starting Bear Bachmeier at quarterback. Yeah. I know you're probably not super familiar with Bear Bachmeier because we haven't talked about him a whole lot, but this is a pretty big deal. This would be the first player for BYU ever to be a true freshman starting in their first game. So pretty inexperienced guy, although we're going to dive into a little bit of what other BYU people have said about this guy here in a second. But I want to first mention this guy's family. He's got a brother named Tiger. And they both transferred to BYU, the Cougars. So now there's a bear and a tiger on the Cougars. I know all the BYU fans out there are not shocked by this, but this to me was absolutely, this is awesome. I don't know how else to put it. That's super cool. So just wanted to throw that out there. However, as far as how Bear Bachmeier is kind of perceived, seems like this guy could be the real deal. We're hearing comparisons of like he's better than Tim Tebow was, similar but better to Tim Tebow. Some guys are saying like we've seen a lot of quarterbacks, never seen a guy like this, especially not as a freshman. So this guy obviously standing tall at a 6'2", 225 could get it done for BYU. I'm not here to break down BYU's roster or at least not right now. We'll do that later in the season. We're more here to talk about hypothetically, could a freshman, very green quarterback make it to the Iowa State game and have enough momentum to defeat the Cyclones? My guess, or at least my prediction, is no. There is just no way that they will be able to, whoever it is, Bear Bachmeier obviously is kind of the topic of this conversation, but whoever it were to be would not be able to come into Jack Trice Stadium in Ames, Iowa, and bring home the W. It's just pretty simple. So I wanted to take a look at BYU's schedule, and Jake Hatch, laid this out pretty well. He said, I don't know if there's an easier start to the season for a true freshman quarterback, and I'll give him that, starting with Portland State, Stanford at home, and then East Carolina on the road. Not exactly the toughest schedule of all time. They do, starting with East Carolina, have a 6-game stretch without a bye. Colorado, West Virginia on a Friday, Arizona, Utah, and then Iowa State. So Iowa State's on the tail end of this 6-game stretch. I don't really care too much about what happens after that, unless you're talking about could BYU be a team to rival Iowa State in the Big 12, obviously in that race for the championship game. We'll have that conversation down the line, I'm sure. Right now, that's not really what I'm worried about. Iowa State, BYU in Ames. That's really what I'm worried about right now. That's a tough 6-game stretch, right? That's maybe enough time to get some momentum built, but also enough time for everyone to be feeling pretty worn down, ready for that bye week post Iowa State. For all those reasons, on top of the fact that it is now at least seeming to be a freshman quarterback piloting these BYU Cougars, I'm not concerned about BYU. I'm just not. Now, could the kid be an absolute legend, just slinging the rock around, unable to be tackled, making plays left and right? Absolutely, he could. And I'm not saying that he can't. I'm just saying that he could be, well, not could be, he is going to be running into a buzzsaw against Iowa State. Iowa State, obviously, as you well know, because you've hit subscribe down below, it's completely free. You've helped prove it's a Cyclone state. You've been here every single day. I know that. So you know this. But Iowa State is unbelievably strong and stronger maybe than ever on offense, and unbelievably strong and very deep, I think, is the biggest point on defense. This team is built for success. And I just don't think that a freshman, incoming freshman, true freshman quarterback in his first, 9 games? Is that what that would be his 8th game? Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina, Colorado, West Virginia, Arizona, Utah, Iowa State. So his 8th game ever in college football, be able to take down what I think is very arguably the future Big 12 champs. Like, probably not. That's just my guess. And what about Iowa State? What does that mean for Iowa State? Well, acting under the assumption that BYU isn't going to be as good with Bear Bachmeier at the helm, which I understand. All BYU fans out there, I don't mean any hate. I don't mean any hate to Bear Bachmeier. Just under these circumstances that we're going to act under here, I don't necessarily think then that BYU is making a run for the Big 12 title. Okay. I know we said we'd maybe talk about that later. We're talking about it right now. The reason I say that is because I'm not going to compare Iowa State's schedule to theirs. I just think that this helps Iowa State's floor for the season, and then obviously therefore impacts the ceiling, because previously to this, I had made the BYU game one of those semi-toss-up games, right? K-State going to be a very tough game, first of the season, overseas, conference game, like you name it, rivalry, like every possible reason you can think of, that's a reason it's going to be a tough game. Like, there's no like, oh, this is going to lean Iowa State's way. It's going to be a very difficult game. And listen to Jamie Pollard, everyone that's going, wear your Cardinal. All right, this is not Cardinal. For those of you who are watching, I just was doing this because he did a lot in this video. Wear your Cardinal. All right, it's all behind me. It's a ton of them, and that's an actual Cardinal right there. So you wear that. Anyway, that's gonna be a tough game. And then the Arizona State game, another very tough game. I do think Iowa, not so much because Iowa is really, really good. I would probably never really say that, but more so because it's a rivalry game. Those games are always going to be very, very tight. And so when you look at Iowa State's schedule, Colorado was a game I circled. TCU was a game that I circled as well. I think now with BYU falling, in my opinion, into the tier of like, yeah, we should walk away with this one. Kind of similar to like Baylor's going to be I was looking at the wrong line there. Not Baylor. Kansas, maybe going to be tough, right? Oklahoma State, maybe going to be tough. Like, these teams are still in the Big 12. But once they're in this category, like I'm putting that more into the ceiling or into the floor, like it's a cemented floor, and then the ceiling goes up as a result of that. So now I kind of feel like with this news, this is a bit of a bold take. I think Iowa State's floor now is probably about 9 wins. Yeah, a little bit crazy. I understand that. Probably a little bit of a hot take. But I just 3 losses now becomes harder and harder to pick out. Like, you can find them, right? You could pick every single game that Iowa State would lose. Like, duh, of course. The floor is actually 0 wins and the ceiling is 0 losses, right? So, like, duh. But I just think that Kansas State, probably one of those games. Arizona State, probably one of those games. Who else are you picking? I'm not picking BYU anymore. Maybe they slip up in their 3-game stretch post Dublin. So maybe Iowa is that team. I really don't want to live out that scenario. That's possible. Maybe Arkansas State, maybe South Dakota. Who knows? We're not looking past those teams. But I just don't see it being Arizona or Cincinnati. Maybe they slip up against Colorado, but they probably are winning prior to this anyway, so it's not a big deal. I think they get BYU. Now, TCU, a team you have to look out for, but definitely at a lower tier than Arizona State or Kansas State, in my opinion. Kansas, Oklahoma, teams both that could come in and shock Iowa State, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to automatically assume they're going to lose. So I think my official adjustment until further notice, with obviously maybe Bear Bachmeier is truly a better version of Tim Tebow. Maybe that's possible, but until further notice, I think my new floor now for Iowa State is 9-3. I mean, I that's the way that I see it. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I suppose it's possible down in the comments below, or at Nick_Marv on Twitter. I obviously read them all, and I'm always interested to see what you guys think. All right, let's talk about the tight ends, because I think that will be one of the biggest keys to Iowa State's success this upcoming season, especially through the air. We're talking about more coming up right here after this. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion after week one even kicks off, before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. Me personally, is Jaden Daniels at MVP too crazy? Is that too crazy? Is taking the Patriots as the eventual Super Bowl champions too crazy? Those are probably my two picks. I'm not going to lie. Or you can parlay those division winners, division winner dark horses too. I mean, that's also a really fun thing that I like to do every single year. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Pivoting away from BYU and towards tight ends here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Part of this stems from the Taylor Mauser press conference the other day. I talked about it yesterday. I mean, I have full pages of notes here that is just sitting right in front of me, and I didn't get through all of them yesterday. And I said I wanted to come back to kind of what he said. But the big thing that really stood out to me was the area that I had in all caps and bold and underlined: the tight ends. It seems like, as I said yesterday, this group is asked about consistently throughout the press conference, is maybe the crux of Iowa State's success this upcoming season on offense. Maybe. I would argue that I think the running backs probably need to play really, really well, but half the time the tight ends are going to be blocking for them. So, the tight ends and the linebackers are both position groups that, in my opinion, are kind of like that, the jelly between the two pieces of bread, right? Or the peanut butter between the two pieces of bread. Or could they be both in a two tight end set, the peanut butter and the jelly between the two pieces of bread, the bread being the run and the pass, essentially, right? So they do both. They can receive passes they can catch balls, or they can block for guys running with the ball. Or I suppose they could even run the ball themselves. So let's not get too crazy though. Obviously, tight ends, pivotal to really any offense out there. And I think that this group of tight ends for Iowa State is a very, very strong group. Bachmeier, Burkle, maybe Alexander in that mix. I think we've heard a lot this offseason about how good these guys are going to be, and I'm very excited about what's possible with this group of guys. More so because of the return from injury. Cooper Alexander, a name that I will just say over and over. I will repeat it until maybe forever. I don't really know how long it's going to last, because it just keeps coming up and I just keep saying it. So look out for him, obviously, but Bachmeier and Burkle, I think, are probably the two that most people think of. And obviously Mauser was one of those guys previewing kind of the group, and those were the first two out of his mouth. And then Alexander and Tyler Moore in there as well. Balling out. That's basically what he said about him. However, that was early on in the press conference. That's what we kind of talked about yesterday. Later on in the press conference, said some words, Mauser did, about these tight ends that I didn't think were really worth skipping over, right? Sometimes some answers, it's like, okay, we just said something. Some words. All right, moving on. These words, however, I felt like held a lot more weight. Bachmeier and Burkle, they were spoken about like they were the answer to this Iowa State team. Talked about like they, well, compared to guys like Kohler, Higgins, and Knoll. Like that's really where I'm trying to go with this. I'll just spit it out. Okay. Those are high praise words coming from Mauser, to stick with this words kick that I'm on. The Higgins and Knoll one was more so from the concept of the leadership, first in, last out, studying film, doing everything the right way, the daily habits. Pull a page out of Otz's book there. That's kind of where the Higgins and Knoll concept comes from. Not so much, obviously, from the physical attributes, which they are physically just wild, of course. Like we know that, but not in a wide receiver way, in a tight end way. You wouldn't really want a lot of tight ends looking like Haynes or Knoll. So that's not necessarily what he was saying. But the Kohler one I took as like, they're like Kohler. Like they are genuinely very good at their position. And so I immediately was like, okay, this is a big deal. The tight end group could make a huge difference for this team. And we've talked so much about could the Rocco maybe kind of shift his attention from the wide receivers to the tight ends this upcoming season. Possible. I think very likely, actually. Definitely something that very well could happen. I was looking at this here. Beck's career passing touchdown distribution. This is what kind of has me a little bit held up, but it's possible. And I'll piggyback off this here in a second. He's thrown 32 touchdowns to wide receivers, 11 to tight ends, and 4 to running backs. Okay. About triple the amount of touchdowns thrown to wide receivers. That kind of makes sense, right? That's pretty common. However, I think that this season we could see almost the flip of that potentially. Obviously, it depends on what the wide receivers are able to do. But if we see a flip in a dominance of tight ends, a large share of the receptions going to tight ends, a large share of plays dedicated to tight ends, I was just wondering, like, how does that impact defenses, right? That's going to shift how teams play Iowa State. It just really opens it up. It does. It makes everything more unpredictable, I think, because obviously tight ends, as I said, middle of that sandwich. So if you're going to go man up on the tight ends, it's just a multifaceted layer attack now for Iowa State. It opens up their wide receivers on the outside, makes it easier for tight ends to get to those blocks on the inside. If they're over top in a man set, you don't have to get all the way out 8 yards outside the line of scrimmage to block that Will who drifted out into a zone, right? Like it's just easier to make those blocks as well. So am I a super guru when it comes to schemes? No, I'm not going to lie to you guys. Okay. I'm just going to be honest, but you can't tell me that if we were to see the inverse of what is generally pretty traditional of about 3 times the amount of touchdowns to wide receivers as tight ends, and we in fact see 3 times as many targets or touchdowns to tight ends as we do wide receivers, you can't tell me that wouldn't have a positive impact on how Iowa State attacks other teams. I think it's more unconventional, and that's probably a good thing in almost every scenario, basically in life, right? And so I think it plays over really well into this side of things here. Really quick, I'll kind of close this out. We were talking tight ends, but also I really wanted to really round out Mauser's press conference. It sounds like this offense is just better, more knowledgeable, I think is really where this is stemming from. All of these guys, from what I'm hearing, know the entire offense. And we've talked about this. You start with you only know your position, then you might learn the other wide receivers if you're a wide receiver, and then eventually you kind of learn what's going on in the entire field. Sounds like that's happening for every position on Iowa State's roster. Everyone is more knowledgeable, specifically talking about the tight ends in this example. And I believe also the linemen were specifically mentioned in this, which we'll pivot to in just a second here. But like the school that they did over this summer might be the best play that Iowa State has ever made. Having more knowledge on the football field is a good thing. It is a good thing to know what is going on your team and how you're going to react to whatever the defense is showing. On top of what the tight ends are able to do physically, this could be the biggest jump. And we talk about Mauser as an OC and then Heacock as a DC. Like, we could be seeing a major jump in Iowa State football capability this season. So I think that's a great backup to the point of 9 wins is the floor. Like, we genuinely could see, and I think we will see, a different football team this season. Like a whole nother level, way, way, way better than we're used to. Because I saw some people talking about like floors and ceilings. It's like, I would never predict Iowa State to have 10 wins. In 3 years, I think we're going to be predicting that. I genuinely think that this is the turnaround. This is the year. I mean, we had it real good last year, but can we do it back to back? I think the way everything's shaping up, absolutely. A very key part of that, though, is going to be the offensive line. So we're going to talk about that coming up right here after this. As summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love, and Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding to linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. Obviously, you guys can see brand new apartment behind me, so took a look at everything on Wayfair's website. They had everything I could possibly ever need: couch, end table, dining room, chairs, you name it. They have got it. It's a perfect place to get my apartment ready, whether it's organizing, upgrading my workspace, or making weeknight dinners easier. Get organized, refreshed, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right. We've talked a lot of offense this offseason. Makes a lot of sense. Here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm kind of a lot like everyone else. I like to score points. I really do. So we have talked a lot about the possibilities at wide receiver, the possibilities at running back, the possibilities at tight end, right? Quarterback even has been chatted about, even though it's pretty cut and dry what's going on there. Though, as I said yesterday, look out, Mansky. Be a big deal. Could be very good. What we haven't talked so much about, though, is the offensive line. And a part of that is because there are big question marks at the offensive line position for Iowa State this upcoming season. We're not really sure who's going to be where. And Clanton has talked about, Coach Clanton has talked about they're switching guys around all over the place. And it's going to be the best group of 5 out there. We've talked about how the offensive unit of an offensive line is better than the 5 best guys out there. That's pretty common sense, I feel like, at this point. For most, I think, that understand the offensive line, which is arguably actually not that many. So I kind of walk myself back a little bit on that one. However, there are kind of 3 guys that really stand out on this offensive line, and they're specifically fighting for the center position. They're the 3 Bs, as we have kind of alluded to before: Dylan Barrett, Jim Boniface, and Brendan Black. Okay. This could be a great year for the offensive line because once we find this starter, we've got 2 absolute dogs that can slip in at guard. And obviously we talk about you want the best 5 guys that play together out there, but you would rather have good guys that play well together than guys who aren't very good who play well together. Like, if you can keep that they play well together constant, it's probably better that they are good at the offensive line. So if Barrett, Boniface, and Black are all very good and can play well together on the offensive line, that's a good sign. That is a very good sign. And we haven't even really talked about Austin Barrett. Remember, came over from Indiana, right? That could be a really big deal. Guy we haven't chatted about a whole lot here. This offensive line group, I don't think I need to state how important it is to the team, right? We talk so much about the tight ends. We talk so much about the wide receivers. We talk so much about the running backs. It's typical. The offensive line flies under the radar, yet they are the ones determining how these plays go. And I'm going to go personal route here for just 1 second. If you've played any college football 26, you know the offensive line is pretty important. I was just playing my ISU Dynasty last night, and I was getting sacked after like 0.2 seconds. Like, genuinely, just immediately. Guys going unblocked. Unfortunately, Rocco Becht, sack, hurry, pressure. Like, it was actually not that fun. I had to keep running it with Hansen to take down the Hawkeyes. You know that I took down the Hawkeyes. Of course. It wasn't very close either. But you understand the point. I was like totally struggling. Why? Because the offensive line wasn't playing well. And I'm not going to turn this into a whole speech of, what the offensive line means to a team, because we know that obviously they're the ones that provide the running lanes and they're the ones that do the blocking. So I think a better question is, because we don't know who's going to be starting or playing. And I'm not going to pretend like we do. That would be a slightly immature, to be completely honest. I want the best 5 guys out there, but I don't know who they are. So we're just going to let them kind of do their thing. I think a better route to go is to talk about what the big jump at offensive line could mean for this team. For one, I think Rocco starts to escalate himself or propel himself into that NFL caliber quarterback, right? We now have a guy who's like seriously on the Heisman watch list, obviously offensive player of the year. Like this guy being Rocco, this guy can play in the public perception. I think that's great for the Iowa State Cyclones and for the Big 12 as a whole. I think absolutely if you have that top tier quarterback talent, that shifts the perspective of a team and of a conference. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that the Big 12 has arguably the best group of quarterbacks across all the conferences and still isn't quite getting that respect. Maybe more so now than in recent years, but not quite as much as they deserve, in my opinion. You got Avery Johnson, Robinson, Becht, Levitt. Like, there's a ton of guys. Okay, I'm not trying to single anyone out. Just literally naming off the top of my head, like boom, 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 boom. We have an unbelievable quarterback conference. But I think that if this line is able to hold up and give Rocco Becht the time he needs to run through his progression, something he talked about he's going to do better this season, we could be looking at a quarterback who is absolutely NFL caliber, because Rocco's making his own leaps and bounds as far as being a better quarterback this offseason. Like, that's what players do, is they get better. But if the line around him gets better, it only amplifies what he's able to do. And then on top of that, Rocco being an athlete, he's going to run with it every now and then too. So it's not like the line needs to be perfect every single play. I think a lot of teams, and I say that, and I think a lot of people go, oh, duh. Now, I think a lot of teams out there do kind of need their line to play almost perfectly. And if they don't, that play now becomes one that gets thrown in the bin, right? It's not exactly a play that they want to relive. Now, of course, in the film room, nobody wants to relive some mistakes. I get it. But if the line breaks down, I have full faith in Rocco that he's going to be able to extend the play and move things downfield. That's great to have. That's a great trait for Rocco to have. Great quality for me to trust is his ability to get downfield, move the sticks, at least close the gap for a shorter third down. So, yes, the line does need to. Well, if they step up, we will see better quarterback play. But also, Rocco's pretty good too. What does that mean, though? Rocco obviously playing better means that the wide receivers are going to be better. And I think we are going to see kind of what Mauser alluded to. This is the best wide receiver room we've maybe had since Mauser came here. Well, if Rocco gets time to throw to them and work through his progressions, that statement will be amplified. And that will probably be played throughout the season if those guys play well, because I think it was a shocking statement to a lot of people. How could they be better than Higgins and Knoll? Like, there's just no way. Well, if Rocco ends up with a lot more time, they'll probably get open. It's hard to cover somebody for an extended period of time. I think that Higgins and Hutchinson, or not Hutchinson, excuse me, Xavier Townsend have the ability. What did I just say? Higgins and Hutchinson? No. Sorry, I apologize. I'm thinking of the picture of the Texans all in the huddle of Higgins, Knoll, and Hutchinson. No. I mean, Sowell and Townsend have the ability, the speed to break open over time. Now, finally, of course, the running backs. I don't think that there is as big of a jump here as there is at wide receiver and at quarterback. I think we're going to see wider open running lanes here. But I think that really at the end of the day, Hansen and Abusama are dogs. And they're going to be able to get through no matter what the offensive line provides them with. Maybe not the most popular take out there. I just think we have a great backfield of running backs. And unless they're pretty much not blocking guys at all, they're going to be just fine. I don't have any apprehension on saying that either. I think that those are two of the best running backs in the entire nation. And so, yeah, we're going to have other guys like maybe Dylan Lee or River Peppers that are going to step in and also carry some of that workload. But I think Carson Hansen and Abusama are going to absolutely ball out this season, really regardless of what the line does. That was a little bit of a curveball for you to end today's episode, but I really think this running back room, it's hard to really pick one thing that Iowa State's going to be the best at, because in every category, it feels like this is the best they've ever been. The one I wouldn't have said that in was wide receiver, and Mauser told me differently. He said, hey, this is the best I've ever seen it. So now as I said in the first segment, I don't see him winning less than 9 games. It's going to be a historic year for Iowa State, and it's a historic time right now as you guys are all smashing the subscribe button. We're going to hit 1,000 before doubling. Thank you all so much. Shout out to you guys. That being said, that's going to do it for today. So until next time, Cyclone fans, stay safe out there. Sign